Tanner Horner death penalty. The van video that broke the jury inside a Texas courtroom. Grown jurors broke down in tears as horrifying audio from a FedEx delivery van echoed through the room.
Sure. I just have to do that weird to that little girl. I didn't think you did it. I just know that I know how you did it.
Well, honestly, with my medication, I barely even have video evidence.
A 7-year-old girl's final moments had been secretly captured, and the man responsible believed confessing would save him from death row. But he had no idea investigators already had something far more devastating than a confession. What unfolded next became one of the most disturbing true crime trials America had seen in years. On November 30th, 2022, an entire Texas community united to search for missing 7-year-old Athena Strand after she suddenly vanished from her father's home. Volunteers searched through darkness while helicopters circled overhead, hoping she was still alive. But behind the panic, a delivery driver named Tanner Horner was hiding a terrifying secret inside his FedEx van. And once detectives connected him to Athena's disappearance, the case took a horrifying turn nobody was prepared for. At first, investigators treated Athena Strand's disappearance like every parent's worst nightmare, a missing child case where every second mattered. Paradise, Texas was suddenly flooded with police vehicles, search teams, volunteers, and helicopters. Neighbors walked through fields carrying flashlights. Roads were blocked off. Officers knocked on doors one by one, searching for any clue that could explain how a 7-year-old little girl had vanished so quickly. For hours, hope was still alive. Many believed Athena had simply wandered away and would eventually be found scared, cold, but safe. But as the night dragged on, investigators started noticing something disturbing. Earlier that same day, a contracted FedEx delivery driver named Tanner Horner had been making deliveries throughout the area. One of those stops happened to be Athena's home. At first, that detail didn't immediately raise alarms. Delivery drivers moved through neighborhoods every day. Nothing about the interaction initially seemed unusual, but then detectives began reviewing timelines, surveillance footage, delivery route data, shell phone movements, witness interviews, and slowly, everything started pointing back to one person, Tanner Horner. The moment investigators brought him in for questioning, the entire case changed forever. What detectives expected to be a routine interview quickly turned into a confession that stunned even seasoned investigators. According to authorities, Horner admitted that after accidentally striking Athena with his delivery vehicle, he panicked instead of calling for help. But prosecutors would later argue that panic only explained the beginning. What came next was a series of deliberate choices. Investigators said Horner confessed to placing Athena inside the delivery van instead of contacting emergency responders. Then, while the entire community desperately searched for the missing child, prosecutors say he made the decision to end her life himself. Inside the interrogation room, Horner described the moments in chilling detail. Detectives listened as he explained how he attempted to strangle Athena and break her neck as quickly as possible.
You choked her? One hand or two hands? Two. Like, was she facing away from you when you were choking her?
And start off, I tried to
Tried to break her neck?
I tried to break her neck, make it as quick and painless as possible, but it didn't work. She started crying.
But according to his own statement, it didn't happen immediately. She started crying. That single sentence would later haunt the courtroom, because while search parties were still hoping to rescue Athena alive, investigators say the man responsible had already admitted to hearing her cry inside the back of that truck. And what made the case even more horrifying was the evidence investigators discovered afterward. The delivery van itself had cameras installed inside, not just exterior cameras, interior recording systems. Those recordings would eventually become some of the most emotionally devastating evidence presented during the trial. When jurors later watched portions of the footage in court, reports say several openly cried. The courtroom fell completely silent. Even experienced officers struggled to sit through it. Authorities said the footage helped reconstruct the final timeline of what happened inside the van after Athena was abducted. And prosecutors believed it destroyed any argument that Horner's actions were simply the result of temporary panic, because investigators say there were multiple opportunities where he could have stopped, multiple moments where he could have called 911. Multiple chances to save a child's life, but according to prosecutors, he chose not to. Instead, after Athena died, authorities say Horner drove around with her body still inside the van, trying to decide what to do next. Then came another chilling admission. During questioning, Horner allegedly told investigators he eventually tossed her in the bushes. The words shocked investigators, not only because of how cold they sounded, but because of how casually they were delivered. By that point, hundreds of people across Texas were emotionally invested in finding Athena alive. Volunteers were sacrificing sleep to search fields and roadsides. Meanwhile, prosecutors say the man responsible already knew exactly where she was. Soon after the confession, authorities located Athena's body and Tanner Horner was formally arrested. The charges were severe: capital murder, aggravated kidnapping. And from the very beginning, prosecutors made one thing absolutely clear: they intended to seek the death penalty. The case instantly exploded across national headlines.
Hi, well, this was a very brief proceeding today, lasting less than 1 hour. And the jury charge will serve as a roadmap for jurors to follow as they make their final decision in this case next week. The wording of these questions matters because it defines how jurors can reach their decision.
People across the country followed every update as more disturbing details emerged from court documents and investigative reports. Many were especially disturbed by how quickly the situation escalated after the initial accident investigators believed triggered everything. Because according to prosecutors, this case was no longer about a tragic mistake. It was about the decisions made afterward, the choices, the concealment, the attempt to silence a child instead of saving her. And as the case moved toward trial, the emotional weight surrounding Athena Strand's death only continued to grow. But nobody inside that courtroom was prepared for what would happen once the jury finally heard the evidence for themselves. As the trial officially began, Tanner Horner faced a courtroom already overwhelmed with emotion. Athena Strand's family sat only feet away from the man accused of taking her life. Reporters packed the gallery. Investigators who had worked the case for months returned to testify. And across Texas, thousands closely followed every development, waiting to see what punishment the jury would ultimately decide. But then came one of the most shocking moments of the entire case. Tanner Horner pleaded guilty. The admission immediately changed the direction of the trial. Jurors no longer needed to decide whether he committed the crime. Horner himself had already accepted responsibility for capital murder. Now only one question remained. Should he spend the rest of his life in prison, or should the state of Texas sentence him to death? That question transformed the courtroom into an emotional battlefield. Prosecutors argued this was not simply a tragic accident followed by panic. They said Horner made repeated, conscious decisions that turned a horrible situation into something far more horrifying. They reminded jurors that Athena was still alive after the initial encounter, that she cried inside the van, that there were countless opportunities to stop, to call 911, to ask for help, to save her life. Instead, prosecutors argued he chose violence, concealment, and ultimately murder. Then came the evidence that reportedly left jurors visibly shaken. Video and audio captured from inside the delivery van. According to courtroom observers, the atmosphere changed completely once the footage began playing. Several jurors openly cried. Family members lowered their heads in grief. Even hardened investigators struggled to maintain composure because suddenly, this wasn't just testimony anymore. The jury was hearing the terrifying reality of Athena's final moments unfold in real time. And for many people inside that courtroom, it became impossible to forget. Throughout the proceedings, Tanner Horner remained mostly quiet. At times, he appeared emotionless, avoiding eye contact while witnesses spoke around him. That silence quickly became one of the most talked about aspects of the trial online. But the emotional center of the courtroom came from Athena's family. During victim impact statements, her mother delivered heartbreaking testimony that left the room in tears. She spoke about being there for Athena's first breath, her first steps, her first words, but not her last moments, and the pain in those words echoed through the courtroom. The defense team attempted to spare Horner from execution. Attorneys argued that life without parole would still guarantee public safety. They pointed to his upbringing, mental health struggles, and personal history as reasons the jury should choose mercy instead of death. But prosecutors pushed back aggressively. They argued the brutality of the crime, combined with the deliberate actions afterward, justified the harshest punishment Texas law could deliver. Finally, after days of testimony and emotional arguments, the jury left to deliberate. The courtroom waited in silence, then the jurors returned. Tanner Horner stood as the judge read the decision. The jury had answered the special issues required under Texas law in a way that made the punishment automatic: death. Tanner Horner was formally sentenced to execution for the murder of 7-year-old Athena Strand. The ruling closed one of the most disturbing criminal cases Texas had seen in years.
Mr. Horner, if you'd stand, please. It's the order of the court that you, Tanner Lynn Horner, has been adjudged to be guilty of the offense of capital murder as found by the jury. Jury having answered the special issues making it mandatory that your punishment be death, it is therefore the order of this court that your punishment be death.
A case that began with an entire community desperately searching for a missing little girl and ended with a courtroom confronting evidence too painful for many jurors to even watch. But for Athena's family, no sentence could truly erase what happened. Because while the trial finally ended, the loss never will. And this case continues to raise difficult questions about violence, accountability, and how a single decision can destroy countless lives forever. If you want more deeply researched true crime documentaries covering shocking investigations, courtroom breakdowns, and disturbing real-life cases, stay tuned for the next story. And after hearing every detail in this case, do you believe the death penalty was the right punishment for Tanner Horner? Or should life in prison have been enough?